Hi, so welcome to Rig Run Recovery Zone. My name's Sarah and I'm a fitness consultant with Rig Run. Today I'd like to introduce you to Joseph Warwick. Joseph is a whole-time leading firefighter with London Fire Service. He's also a lecturer at University and College of London in sports exercise and medicine science. So today he's here to talk to us about how to keep physically and mentally fit for his role as a firefighter. If you do have any questions, you can pop them in the chat box and we'll try and get around to them at the end of the presentation. So it's over to you, Joseph. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me. So we're going to look at kind of the fitness considerations for firefighters today. So we're going to start off literally, I'll introduce myself and go through kind of what I've done, where I've come from and what I'm doing, and then we'll go through some bits and pieces. So the kind of agenda for today. So again, like I said, I'll introduce myself and then we'll talk about needs analysis. So I'm not going to give you all the answers. I'm not going to turn around and say this is exactly how you get fit and what you do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to structure it in a way so that I'll show you kind of the thought process as to how you find out what you need to do, where you look, and then what to consider so that you can actually go away from this and develop your own strategy to better yourself as a firefighter. It's quite hard. So offshore firefighters, there's very, very minimal data and not much information on that. So I've taken stuff in and around like the services as a whole and brought that in, and we'll build from there. So as you can see, I'm a family man. So I joined not that long ago, about 5 years ago. I'm operational firefighter with London Fire Brigade, but I'm currently acting up to leading firefighter. So in my part-time, I'm a lecturer in sports medicine at University College London. So my background is strength and conditioning. So I did my undergraduate degree in strength and conditioning science at St Mary's in Twickenham. And then I went on to do my master's in sports, exercise medicine and health at UCL. That then landed me a lecturing position as well. And they brought me in to do a load of research with them. So which was really, really cool. So I started looking at a collaboration with the Metropolitan Police, and we looked at all sorts of operational fitness considerations. And I've done some projects with counter-terrorist, like National Network Group, and all different ARV, AFOs. Whilst I was in the London Fire Brigade, they kind of got wind of me doing this, and they heard what I was up to, and they put me in collaboration with Bath University to work on a high-rise firefighting project where we looked at the considerations for our high-rise tasks, essentially, as we've got lots and lots of those in London. I'm also a director of my own company, so we run CP Performance, which is a strength and conditioning sports science kind of company, and we deliver to amateur professional athletes and looking at expanding that program as well. I've got quite a deep research interest in the physiological requirements and of the operational demands for all kind of public services. So with regards to the fire service and the police, as I say, I've collaborated with LFB and the Met to work on some different projects. Those will be peer-reviewed papers that are currently in review, and they've actually been used to change kind of operational guidelines nationally as well, which is really, really cool. As a strength and conditioning coach, I was a strength and conditioning coach at London Wasps and through their academy and at Hampton School. So I ran the strength and conditioning for the rugby programme. I also did consultancy with the English Table Tennis Association, and then I left as Wasps went to Coventry. I left rugby as a whole and joined football. So I was the head of strength conditioning and sports science for Chelsea Women. I spent exactly 4 years with them, developing their performance department and working quite closely with the medical department and their head coach to lay the legacy of what is their now strength and conditioning team and department there. So the guys that I hired under me as assistants and interns are still there in the program running it. People always say to me, so why on earth did you leave strength and conditioning? Why did you leave sport? Well, ultimately, it was my family that drove this for me. So I was I was in sport knowing that as soon as I wanted to have kids, I wasn't actually going to stay in sport because of the demands of the job. And people think, oh, you only do a couple of hours a day. Lots and lots of travel, lots and lots of work. It was actually real intense. So for me, I sat down with a friend of mine and we had a conversation about time off. And he was a firefighter in London at the time. And I wanted to meet up with him to have a coffee. He showed me his rota and his calendar and showed me all the days off he had in between tours. And over a whole month of days, I think I had one half day. And so I decided, actually, I'm going to put my family first and I'm going to do something different. So everyone, when they says, "Oh, I joined the fire brigade to help people," I took it a little bit selfishly. I joined the fire brigade to give me time to spend with my family, which is now grown. I've got 3 little monkeys. But yeah, it was the best decision I ever made. It's the greatest job in the world. We get an awful lot of time to focus on families, friends, our own things, as well as helping the community. So I love it. Okay, so what do we need to consider for developing our fitness as firefighters? So the first thing we do, and even if we take it from a sporting approach, is we develop a needs analysis. So needs analysis essentially is, what do we need to know to get us from point A to point B, or what do we need to know that allows us to be successful? A couple of points. So I'm going to break it down. Needs analysis can, when you look at a sporting needs analysis, it's typically 7 to 9 points, especially if you look into the research by Verkhoshansky and Melsif and the old Soviet stuff, and then you look at the NSCA's approach to developing a needs analysis. What I've done is I've taken the 4, what I think are the most prevalent, and brought them into context for operational firefighters. So the first thing you want to consider is your S factors. So you're identifying specific qualities that relate to success. So with sporting context, they call it the sporting factors. For operational context, I'll call it a success factor. This is simple things like, what strength do I need? Do I actually need to have a real high level of absolute strength, or do I need a good level of isometric strength? You know, does it matter if my 1RM is massive, or is it more important that I have the capability of repeated low loads, so like hauling a ladder, you know, to actually maintain that and not exhaust myself? It's no good going into a job and not being able to haul a ladder aloft or pick someone up or something. So you need to think about what the strength qualities are that you need. Suppleness is another one of those. It's a little bit an arbitrary kind of saying, but you need to think about how smooth and mobile and your range of movement, what does it need? So you need to be able to crawl, carry, drag, things like that. So it's all encompassing as suppleness. Speed, again, speed for me, everyone thinks of speed and they think of doing everything super, super fast. So like the way I'm talking right now. So the best thing I can say is less haste, more speed. And for me, the saying that always brings it to the forefront of my mind is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So if you do things slowly, learn them, get the rhythm, get the control, get it synchronized, it actually becomes significantly more fast. So when you think about the speed of a task, think slow is smooth, smooth is fast, and you get the speed of the task done quickly. S factors, again, stamina. So not only cardiovascular stamina, but if I'm repeating this task time in, time out, can I maintain high success levels? So if it's a hard cognitive task, do I have the mental capacity to continually complete and compete and get success? Again, like I said before, skill is one of these things that requires repetition. So you don't want to be running out onto a job, bowling a hose, and it goes all over the place. Or you don't want to be setting into a dry riser and forget everything you're doing. So you need to be practicing repetition. Structure, again, is having a structured coordination to your day. It's a little bit more away from you and more from what your job expects. And spirit, what is one of these S factors, is hugely important, because if you think about morale, you think about how down you are, it's always going to determine how successfully you are at training, like actually what input do I put in? And then that has a massive impact on everything else. So, you know, working as a leading firefighter, you know, it's not my complete job, but it is part of it to keep morale up, to keep the spirit high. And, you know, having people with self-belief and self-determination is massively important. So then we go on to the next part of our needs analysis. So we look at an injury analysis. So what does the data show? Where does this happen? How much does this cost our department or our brigade? You know, what happens when my shoulder goes? What happens when my back goes? Not only where it happens, the severity of what happens, and in any preventative strategies. So your needs analysis needs to encompass that. Movement or biodynamic analysis. So you're thinking about the skill and the task at hand. So what kind of movement qualities do I need to have? Is it identifying individual muscles or individual limbs? You know, hauling a ladder aloft is going to be totally different to dragging a casualty under the arms backwards to running up a flight of stairs. So you need to think about movement qualities that you need. Okay, so stepping up steps when you're doing tower runs with a bit of weight on your back, you think about the quality of movement that you're trying to achieve on the way up versus on the way down. And then physiological, so bioenergetic. So you're thinking about how does my heart, how does my muscular system, skeletal muscular system, how does it relate and impact what I'm doing on this task? So needs analysis can be massive, but I've tried to break it down into these kind of 4 key areas to give us some consideration on what to think about. So when you're thinking about, oh, I want to develop my own fitness strategy or my own fitness plan, or I need to get better, these are the things that to be successful within operation, you should actually be considering. What is the point? What do I need? What's my outcome? And how do I get from where I am by testing and understanding what I'm capable of now to where I need to be? And ultimately, we as operational firefighters need to have high levels of cardiovascular, muscular strength and muscular endurance to save people. That's the job. That's what you want to do. So it's no good turning around and just leaving yourself to get old and increase body mass index and etc. because you need to actually go out there and help people. That's your role. So developing your needs analysis to get you from point A to point B, include those 4 as a bare minimum factors, and then you can get into the depths of them by looking at the research. So what does the data actually suggest? Well, from a cardiovascular perspective, if you actually train properly, develop your cardiovascular system, you'll get a reduction in your body fat percentage. But what is actually shown in the research is that time in, actually, firefighters that have longer service tend to actually have an increase in their BMI and body fat percentage. Now, there's lots of causal factors behind this, but it's something that you should consider. So am I actually sitting on my arse watching the telly for 3-4 hours on shift when I should be doing something? If you allow your cardiovascular system to deteriorate, you're going to get an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. And this is tenfold in firefighters. So firefighters have an extremely high rate of onset of cardiovascular disease, and the risk is massive. So, you don't want to be putting that on yourself, because yes, you will serve for 20, 30 years or now as it is until you're 60. Well, you need to be minimizing the risk of your health deteriorating when you retire. So it's not just about what you do now, it's about thinking about the future for yourself. Again, there's some simulation tasks that were done, and having a better cardiovascular system, having slightly better VO2 max was associated with much better success of these simulation tasks. So under the foundational cardiovascular training, low-level cardiovascular training, like zone 2, everything under 150 beats a minute, training your cardiac output, so you're trying to get as much blood in and out of the heart as possible. You're not doing like crazy high intensity cardio. Is actually really, really beneficial for this. And there's evidence to show it does protect against cancer, but we know that cancer rates in firefighters are through the roof, and the evidence from Central Lancashire at the moment and Central Lancaster University, are showing this. Considerations for strength. So what does the data suggest for this? So Richard Stevenson, Dr. Stevenson and Professor Bilson from Bath University, I was fortunate enough to work on a project with them a couple of years ago. They've done several research projects, all peer-reviewed and published, and their stuff is actually driving national operational standards, which is really, really good for recruitment and for fitness tests for the fire service. They suggest a minimum of 35 kilo shoulder press, that's to mimic the ladder press above your head, a 60 kilo rope pull down, and 28 kilogram rope pull for repetition. So holding onto a single rope pulling for 33 repetitions. That's their recommendations for a base level of fitness. That's what they suggest is what should be your entry requirements. And I think that is achievable by everyone. It takes a little bit of practice, but again, that's not a high level of strength, in my opinion. I think we could set the bar a bit higher. Again, muscular endurance. So where does this differ? So this is, again, that 28 kilo rope pull for 23 reps. That's muscular endurance, really. But when it's combined with high levels of cardiovascular fitness, it's been shown to massively improve success within a firefighting task, or simulated task, which is what you do with your job, which is what you want. There's also a paper that's come out more recently that shows that if you can't do 40 push-ups in a row, then you have an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. So this was a retrospective study that looked at a huge cohort of the population, of male population over the years, and they went back through what they was able to achieve when they were younger compared to what they can achieve now, about 20 years ago versus now. And they found those that didn't have the ability to push more than 40 push-ups were at a significantly increased cardiovascular disease. So there's some simple wins there for you, isn't there, straight away? Low-level cardiovascular training, some clear, obvious guides for strength, the minimum capabilities for the tasks to like for ladder extension, etc. And then a body weight exercise. Like everyone can train themselves up to be able to do push-ups. Okay. Finally, typical injuries, typical musculoskeletal injuries. So the data suggests that firefighters as a whole across the nation will have knee, lower back, shoulder and ankle injuries, and knees being one of the most prevalent. And this is injuries that occur during operational tasks. So this is actually injuries on the job. So we think about why and what we're doing and how we would then implement our training. We need to take these into consideration. How do we protect these? How do we protect our knees and our back? Protecting our lower back isn't a case of just wearing a belt and cracking on. It's about developing the core. I hate the word core, the trunk. It's developing the trunk as a system, as a sling, I suppose, where you transfer force from one to the other, and from one hip to the opposing shoulder. Sorry. And it's about understanding that actually it is allowed to move. We do want flexion, extension, rotation, etc. on the back. Okay. So yeah, they're key areas that the data suggests we should be considering for firefighters for fitness. Now, I've taken this from the operational perspective, and this massively would be massively beneficial for any offshore firefighter as well. Tasks such as running up and down stairs has been proven that if you have a higher level of cardiovascular fitness, or a higher VO2 max, not only will you get there quicker, but you'll actually be able to achieve a task when you get there. So one of the things we did was we ran firefighters 30 floors upstairs in full PPE, under air, different conditions under air, so had SDBA, EDBA, and a rebreather. And they carried a 15-kilo enforcer, and we ran them up the stairs, was able to check their core temperature. And this is not currently published data, but hopefully it will be. Check their core temperature and ask them about their capabilities on of completing tasks, and then their rating of perceived exertion. And we was able to correlate those that had a good or great VO2 max were actually able to successfully complete this really, really quickly, keep their core temperature down, keep the heart rate down, and actually talk and keep your RPE down, actually complete a basic task at the top, which is really cool, which is really really insightful data that needs to be understood, so people go out there and actually start to develop their cardiovascular fitness. Offshore wise, if you're running up and down an oil rig on a set of stairs, you know, obviously if you're not slipping over, then because of the weather, then that would be a great way to train your cardiovascular system to tolerate that. So training considerations. So psychological. So there's a massive influx of research around mental health, sadness, anxiety, depression, and they found that training 1 to 2 times a week will actually reduce depression symptoms. And if you train less than 3 hours per week, you show less benefit than if you train greater than 5 hours per week. So we know anecdotally suicide rates and things are through the roof for firefighters in the fire service. So if we start thinking about, well, we need to train 5 hours a week to reduce this, then that's only going to be beneficial. The lower limb and trunk extensions combined can reduce lower back pain. So if you've got any lower back pain, you want to be considering how you can reduce that. And then there's things to consider with regards to the trunk. The trunk itself has the appendages attached. So you've got the shoulders attached and the hips attached. You want to be looking at how your spine is impacted by your shoulder range of movement. And if you've got to lean your chest back to press overhead to extend that ladder, you know you've got impingement problems with your shoulder that need to be fixed. So thinking about that for your trunk, so you're thinking about how the shoulders impact your trunk, how your trunk impacts your shoulders, will have massive benefits on your injury risk reduction strategies going forward. Upper body, again, going back to that kind of 40 push-ups. So that's a really basic kind of guideline, isn't it? We can start focusing on, can we do 40 push-ups in one hit to reduce our risk of cardiovascular disease, improve our muscle mass and overall muscular endurance. And then free weights versus machines, there's always that question, which is better? And each one has a specific outcome and a specific desired task. No element is better than the other, but it's contextual. It does depend on what you need. So if you've got shoulder instability problems and every time you go into an externally rotated position you get a shoulder dislocation, then I would highly suggest you focus on a machine and build up the musculature to keep that shoulder nice and stable. Whereas if you're more than able to do that, then yeah, focusing on free weights is fantastic. There's evidence to show you can improve both. One thing to consider is your 1RM will never be the same in free weights as it will in a machine. So if you do like a hack squat, the squatting machine, you probably load that up significantly more than if you was to do a back squat. So if you're after muscular strength gains, teaching the nervous system how to push against force, fantastic. If you're after stabilizing gains, you're stabilizing the hip, knee, pelvis, ankles, etc., free weights have probably been more beneficial. Lower body strength. So it's real interesting concept, DAPRE, so daily progressive resistance exercise. So it doesn't mean every single day. What it means is your training day. So you're going to auto-regulate the training according to what you can do on that day. And there's some really, really good research by Brian Mann in 2010, 2011, and they make daily adjustments, so training day adjustments, to allow them to slowly over time increase. But they see natural fluctuations, and everyone's different. So you get reductions and peaks as you go through the system. I highly recommend that you look up that system if you haven't already. And it originated in the late 40s, early 50s in the military rehabilitation, where they used 3 sets of 10 and manipulated what happened on the second and third set to get improvements in soldier rehab. It's a really cool system. I love using it. I've used it in elite sport. So yeah, daily auto-regulatory progressive resistance exercise. And I highly recommend you use that for training lower body, because that will be slightly higher intensity, but it allows you to accommodate for fatigue and tiredness. The concept of unilateral strength deficit is really, really good one. So if you do a bilateral back squat, say your back squat's 100 kilos, that doesn't mean you put 50 kilos through each leg. And if I do a split squat, I'm going to have 50 kilos. The central nervous system is fascinating. So if I do a rear foot elevated split squat or a Bulgarian split squat, I could probably get somewhere up to 75 to 80% of my two-legged back squat. And that's because it's the nervous system's ability to produce force and to transmit those signals to the muscles to produce that force. So it's not actually a case of, well, because I can do a bilateral back squat, I'm going to have, you know, exactly 50% there. So this is why unilateral strength training is a fantastic modality to train. So lunging, split squats, rear foot elevated split squats, etc. Foot and ankle, so massively underutilized in most populations. Skipping, jump rope, fast rope, that kind of stuff. There's lots of evidence to suggest it's a really, really good tool. It's a low level, extensive plyometric exercise, which with plenty of volume actually improves tissue robustness around the ankle. So if you've rolled your ankle several times, it actually improves the quality of the ankle, stops you rolling your ankle. Use it a lot in footballers or variations of skipping in footballers so that they could maintain robustness and stay on the pitch. And skipping's easy. Like once you get the rhythm and learn it, you know, everyone can do it. And that's why I think it's been such a prominent feature of boxers conditioning for years. And I don't think it will go. They're just now looking at all of the support behind it as to why it helps develop power and strength, etc. Okay, so quick thing about me. What do? So I train catch wrestling for my psychology, I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu and catch wrestling. Benefits me psychologically. I like to have a roll around. I like to get beaten up a little bit, and I enjoy that. That's my psychological training. I don't really enjoy cardiovascular training, but I try to get in 1 to 2 times per week a low-level cardiovascular training between 20 and 40 minutes and keeping my heart rate under 150 beats a minute. That's all to do with developing the cardiac output side of the cardiovascular system. So left ventricle eccentric hypertrophy. So you take the left ventricle, you allow it to fill up as much as possible with blood, and then squeeze and pump that blood out to the system. If I'm always doing HIIT training, what happens is that you get a different type of hypertrophy in the left ventricle, where you get thicker lining of the heart, so you get a smaller chamber. So when you think about cardiovascular training, you need to train both high and low. So you want to train high to increase the power of the pump, you want to train low to increase the fill of the bag. Work-related stuff. So I love doing carrying. I carry sandbags around. I run up and down the towers. And something else that's a new concept that I really like the idea of is nasal breathing cardio only. So some people actually put tape over their mouth. I think that's a little bit extreme. But focusing on just using your nose to breathe as you train, it allows you to kind of control and regulate that. I wouldn't suggest you do that when you're doing anything really intense, but it gets you into that mindset of controlling your breathing regulation. And strength training, for me, we should see ourselves as tactical operators. We should see ourselves as tactical athletes. So I'd like to try and get in whole body training sessions 2 to 3 times. Well, it says here 1 to 2, but I like to try and get in 2 to 3 3 to 6 exercises, 3 to 5 sets, 3 to 5 reps, anything upwards of 85% of your 1RM to develop strength and power capabilities. Obviously, that's going to differ depending on what your kind of goal is. But if you're focusing on actually being stronger, more robust, then that's the way I believe it should go. I believe you should be focusing on having strength and power capabilities over hypertrophy capabilities. That comes as a benefit of having the others. Okay, final thing from me, post-incident recovery. So very quickly, so the physiological. So we know now, lots and lots of research from Central Lancashire, that you should be washing within the hour. You should be getting out of your dirty kit and having a good wash. So that's a physical element you need to consider. Also, something else that might consider, and it's got to be individual to you, is actually when I get back, do I need to have a stretch? Do I need to meditate? Do I need to, like, active recovery? So sitting on a bike, low level cardiovascular, can I use that as part of my post-incident recovery? A lot of the governors in our job in London are really, really open, really cool. So if you say to them, I've done all my bits, I've had my shower within the hour, I just want to sit on the bike and let my legs tick over, they'll be happy for that. So you've got to think about your physiological recovery as well. So your heart rate might have been through the roof. There's some research from LA that shows that when the bells go down with their firefighters in LA, their heart essentially skipped a beat because of the adrenaline rush. So that adrenaline kickstarts you, gets you up, gets you going. And you know what that's like. Well, essentially what they did with the ECG was monitor what happened with their heart. Their heart essentially skipped a beat every time they did it. So you need to think about the physiological come down, because they were finding that 3 hours roughly after incidents, more senior firefighters were having cardiac arrest. So that's to do with the just coming back and stopping and doing nothing instead of bringing their body down. Like a cool down. Nutrition and hydration. So one of the 3 pillars of your recovery. Hydrate really, really well, lots and lots of water. Make sure your urine is like a straw-like color, and then think about calories in, calories out. At the moment, I've far too many calories in, but you know, we all go through phases. So you need to be consuming enough food to make sure you're recovering, rebuilding that muscle, and capable of going again the next shift. Sleep. Less than 8 hours a day is a significant increase of injury risk and illness, a massive increase of illness onset. So it's really hard when you're on a shift pattern to get that sleep. So you need to think about how you can schedule naps through the day as well. And there's a lot of evidence to show that napping in the day is actually really, really beneficial for productivity and reducing illness and injury risk. And finally, psychological. Exercise is essential, as we discussed earlier. So you need to be getting in regular, upwards of 5 hours a week to decompress, to reduce like stress, anxiety, depression symptoms. And most importantly, nowadays, we know that you need to be talking about this stuff. So if you go onto an incident where something tragic has happened, not only do you need to think about the physical, but you need to think about your psychological, and you need to sit around a mess table, have conversations, and then reach out to other people. Okay, thank you very much. I hope that was insightful. I hope I gave you lots and lots of information, lots of things to consider, and how to look at developing your own training. I do like to talk. If you want to contact me, that's my email, joseph.warwick.18@ucl.ac.uk. I'm more than happy to discuss ideas and concepts.
That was brilliant, Joseph. Thank you very much. Really informative. And I love that idea of naps. That's really good. I like that.
Always nap. I'm a serial napper.
I have one question for you. From a personal point of view as well. So you said that you spent some time coaching with Chelsea's Women's Football Club.
Yep.
Have you noticed any gender differences in the way that females train and respond to this type of training? Or is it, you know, should females be training the same way as guys?
No. So these are general guidelines that are kind of very, very general. But females, we know through the data, female athletes don't develop the same levels of strength, power, speed. However, you always get a few that are very, very capable of being extremely strong and extremely fast. As a rule of thumb, they're not as fast and powerful, but they tolerate more muscular endurance work better. So if you take a female elite long distance or ultra runner, she will surpass a male ultra runner at a certain point, and it's normally quite a way in, but she will surpass, because their cardiovascular system's built differently. They've got less lean muscle mass and generally are better endurance capabilities than male athletes. So you need to think about what it is you're trying to achieve, but there's absolutely no reason why a female can't train for some of the basic strength goals we've shown,
Yeah.
or I've discussed earlier. But yeah, there are different things to consider. Really interesting concept is the idea of training around your menstrual cycle. And I used to use a menstrual cycle tracker with players. So we would look at the concept of how we could do, for those that were regular, a 2-week loading phase and then a 2-week maintenance phase around ovulation. So if we knew, and we tracked their menstrual cycle for years, if we knew roughly where they were going to be, we could give them 2-week loading and 2-week maintenance phases. And that was to do with how your hormones between the follicular and luteal phase are different. So one place I recommend you, if you want to learn a little bit more about that, is Fit Our Woman and Dr. Georgie Bruinvels. They're fantastic, and they've got an app, and you can monitor all that and have a look. But ultimately, no, females shouldn't train exactly the same as men, as males. But you've got so many other variables that play into it that you can train and manipulate. I know Silver Ferns also used to try, and the New Zealand rugby team used to try their 2-week training strategy as well. And we saw some incredible gains with some of our players through that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Joseph. That was really interesting. If you do have any questions that you think of further along the lines, then please do get in touch. But thank you for your time. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
Bye-bye. See you next time.